us at the Parsons Avenue Redevelopment Corporation's 6th annual event. Before we go any farther, I would like to thank this year's premier sponsors. Your support is critical to the success of the organization. I also want to acknowledge one of our board members, Brian Gassaway, for all his creative design support. Next, I would like to acknowledge our board of directors. Jason Reese, Chair, Margot Kimbrough, Vice Chair, Millie Hurt, Treasurer, Logan Dawson, Laura DiFilippo, Omar El Hajmusa, Brian Gassaway, Steve Levin, Angela Mingo, Mike Primo, Kevin Sneed, and Mike Whitman. Next, I would like to recognize our food partners, Shrimp Lips, The Pit Barbecue, and Beyond the Bricks. All three are located on Parsons Avenue, and all three are minority-owned. If you are a sponsor of the event, you'll be receiving gift certificates to one of these establishments in the mail. To say that 2020 has been fraught with challenge is an understatement, but we've been working with our colleagues at the Parsons Area Merchants Association to evaluate the impact of COVID on the local business community by helping identify resources for them, including, if necessary, the materials to secure their vacant property. Small businesses are the backbone of our national economy, so please continue to support them as best you can. On a lighter note, we were able to successfully lobby Columbus City Council to finance the addition of a KOGO bike share station on Parsons Avenue. Thank you to Council Member Elizabeth Brown. As you can see from the map, we are now part of an integrated network of bike stations throughout the South Side and much of the city. You can find the station on the south side of the Parsons Avenue branch of the Columbus Metropolitan Library. As we have mentioned during past events, Park purchased 2 vacant homes at 921 and 923 Parsons Avenue several years ago. We renovated these homes and have been leasing them as affordable housing units. However, we have concluded that this is not the highest and best use for the site. Allow me to introduce the Eleanor. The Eleanor is named after Eleanor Edgar, the mother of Southside community icon Reverend John Edgar. This new construction property will have 12 affordable rental units and approximately 800 square feet of retail space. We are partnering with the Central Ohio Community Improvement Corporation on the project, and as a result, will be able to maintain the affordability of these units long term. Now, we would like to begin our keynote conversation.
Welcome to our keynote discussion. I'd like to introduce Tristan Navera, who covers commercial and residential real estate, economic development, energy, and finance for Columbus Business First. He's going to be our moderator for today's conversation. Tristan, would you like to introduce today's keynote panel?
Yeah, Brian, and thank you for having me here. I'm really pleased to introduce 3 really great names here. We've got Mekka Don, who is an artist, entrepreneur, and an attorney, co-host of the Pilot Boys podcast, and inaugural member of the Big Ten Anti-Hate, Anti-Racism Coalition. So say hey.
Thanks. Hey, how you guys doing?
Then we've also got Yogi Terrell, who is CEO of Warhol and Wall Street, a firm that specializes in disruptive branding and creative campaigns for clients. His firm is behind several marketing campaigns, while Yogi himself serves on the boards of the Short North Alliance, Greater Columbus Arts Commission, Lincoln Theater, NCH's Development Fund, and Create Columbus.
How's everybody doing? Thanks for having me.
And then third but not least, we have Dr. Ray Bignall, who is Assistant Professor of Pediatrics in the Division of Nephrology and Hypertension at Nationwide Children's Hospital and the Ohio State University College of Medicine.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and it's great to have all 3 of you joining us here today. So, I can tell you in the news, in 2020, we all just did not know what was coming in January. I think at first we all kind of thought that COVID was going to be the story of the year, and then things just kind of kept on, and it then once kind of May came around, we found ourselves in the middle of maybe a new awakening, a new reawakening, I hope, in terms of understanding some of our issues with race in the city and across the country. So, with the death of George Floyd at the hands of police in Minneapolis, we've seen widespread sustained protest across the country, which is something, that we'd like to talk about. Sadly, this has brought a lot of attention to people of color being mistreated, killed by law enforcement. It's brought some things to light that can't be ignored anymore, honestly. And we really kind of want to get a sense for why this has struck such a nerve across the nation, and maybe hopefully what's different this time. Just to get started, maybe if you guys would like to share some of your perspective, we can start with Mekka.
It's Mekka, by the way, Mekka Don. I think as you mentioned, the George Floyd killing, I think, struck a nerve, because I think part of what a lot of people in communities of color have been trying to kind of get across over a long period of time is that the brutality at the hands of police has been unjustified. And I think that this is because it was such a sustained period of time. You're talking about 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and it was on video, and everybody could see exactly what happened, and that there was no threat to the police officers. There was no argument, so to speak, of why, they were scared, or the person shot, or the person was resisting, or any of those type of things that you kind of typically see in these videos. I think that's when people started to really, really pay attention. Like, whoa, this can actually really happen. This stuff that people have been saying actually happens like this. So I think that it wasn't just what it did in the Black community, but what it also did in other communities, and particularly in white communities, when they said, okay, hold on, we need to take a step back and listen. And then once that started happening, people started paying attention to other things, and then other videos, and then Ahmaud Arbery, and then, obviously Breonna Taylor, and a lot of other things. And people started to say, whoa, okay, this is a much bigger issue than I thought. And that's why you're seeing sustained protests, not just across the United States, but even internationally, and then also across demographics. So that's kind of my perspective on why this one struck a particular nerve.
And I'll add to that, this is a particularly challenging experience for me as a Black man and a Black man in medicine. There's a lot of reporting that's been done recently that showed that African-American men in medicine actually at its lowest levels since the 1970s. And it's a huge challenge for us in the community to see Black men and Black women, and then Black boys and Black girls treated disproportionately and disaffectively by society, and in particular by society's first responders, by society's leaders and leadership. And that was something that really struck a nerve with me too. As a pediatrician and a pediatric specialist here at Nationwide Children's, I am I'm reminded every day about Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice was 12 years old. And what 12-year-old little boy here in America hasn't been, out playing with a replica of a firearm like he has? I know growing up that I did water guns and all kinds of things like this. For him to have been killed by police as well at that age, and knowing the impact, the disproportionate impact of many adverse childhood events on the development of children, and Black and brown children in particular, really struck a nerve. So like Mekka, I am encouraged by the awakening, as you put it, Tristan, this awakening that's happening in society right now. I'm hopeful that it's sustained through change. And I'm hoping that one of the conversations we can have today is about how neighborhood organizations and anchor institutions like my own can be a part of that change, because there's definitely a lot of work to do and a lot of work to go around.
It's been on my mind pretty heavy since all that stuff been going on. The events really just brought to light what has been going on for decades and generations in our culture. And it's when the world gets to see how we're treated in such a manner, it's shocking, because nobody nobody wants to face the reality of things, right? It's out of sight, out of mind. Just like when Rodney King happened, to see that in that time, to see someone being beat, so badly on camera, taking that veil off of ignorance, right? Like if we don't see it, I don't know about it, I don't have to address it. Those are the moments that really make the whole world stop and say, we need to do something about it. And so the George Floyd situation was just, again, one of those instances where you got to see firsthand how our race is being treated. And so for us, it's been something that we've been always having to face, and we have the conversation over and over. But, you think about what is going to be different. And I agree with what you're saying, Doc, is that it's about action now too, right? And we're getting to the point of, we don't need to have the ebbs and flows of awareness and, we should do something about it. And as time goes on, it's back to the ignorance. And then, something else happens. Like it's getting to the point now where it's about to boil over. And we live in a generation where information, false information a lot of times, like propaganda and fake news is just creating more and more fear. So you have that with the social media technology adding to the conversation now. So I feel like if we don't start looking at it from a humanity perspective, if we don't start looking at it for we're all able to connect and benefit each other and work together, if we don't start seeing it from a how do we progress out of this situation collectively, then it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. That's just my thought.
So, obviously we've seen a lot of chapters of this through, our history. We've seen, after Watts, Martin Luther King, Rodney King. Talk about maybe, do you see lasting results this time, maybe that there weren't in other instances?
You look across, kind of different jurisdictions. I mean, a lot of this stuff is happening locally, right? There's not a lot of national kind of sweeping legislation, but locally you're seeing a lot of things happen in different cities. You're seeing funding being removed from police departments, or qualified immunity being changed, or local kind of laws or restrictions against chokeholds. And you're seeing a lot of actually those actual substantive things happening in different communities, not to mention the corporate world kind of getting involved and, putting money into the communities and, trying to change some of their policies and so on and so forth. And so I think, again, I wasn't, I'm a little younger, so I don't know exactly how everything shifted in the 60s and 70s. And I remember some of it just from history, but just living through this now, it feels different, because I feel as though it's not just people marching and people, protesting. It's that people are coming up with very substantive things and are not relenting until they see them through. So like I said, it's more of a localized thing that I've seen, but the movement is obviously national. And then I think, I wanted to mention Jacob Blake as well, because I do think on some levels there was starting to be a little bit of dying down of kind of the energy towards this. And then once Jacob Blake happened again, it kind of resurged. And to Yogi's point, though, I do think it's important that, people like us and people who are passionate about this make sure that we're not just raging, which is easy to do and it's understandable to do, but that we're also very specific in what it is that we want and continue to push forward for those things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there is changes happening out of each of these. Every time something like this happens and the whole world stops, we all put in some work to move the needle forward, right? And it's happened like that throughout generations, from civil rights, before civil rights, slavery, all of that. It's always been a movement of the people that ends up making change to progress to the next level. So, it's our moment to progress it to the next level. And so all the change that happens locally would change. And I think more people need to realize that the more change that we put in locally starts to trickle up to nationally as well. It's like we always look at it from top down, like we got to change what's happening at the top, but we don't realize that, a lot of that top down stuff starts in your own, local community. And so I feel like we're in this moment now where what is going to be that next step that we take forward. And like you said, there's a lot of stuff happening now, Mekka, and like legislation and stuff like that locally, but that all starts to matriculate across the country, and we move yet again one step, forward as a people So I do believe that that will keep on going as long as we stay focused on making more of that long-term change.
And one more quick point real quick too on that is that I believe that we have to realize that, when we're trying to, the biggest thing that we're trying to eradicate is racism and systemic racism. And that's something that is way more challenging than we can even imagine, right? Because this is generational, it's historical. I mean, hundreds of years back. So the question then becomes, or what's the next kind of best thing, right? You're not going to necessarily change people's hearts overnight. And I think the thing is you have to realize that, okay, people are going to feel how they're going to feel. You can try to talk through it and maybe, create environments where people can talk and maybe have a meeting of the minds. But the better thing to do is actually to create the system, to dismantle or to create the systems where even if you harbor those feelings in your heart, you're not able to execute them without punishment of some sort or without the justice system coming down on you. And I think that's part of what, Black people have been complaining about for the longest. It's not just, that we're being killed. That's obviously a big thing, but it's also that we're being killed and then there's no justice at the end. And so that's the other thing, is that if we can start to create systems or, again, dismantle the systems that uphold some of this oppression and some of this systemic racism, I think we can get closer to where we want to be, even if people still harbor those feelings internally.
As you guys are talking, I was reminded of an anecdote I heard shared, a metaphor I heard shared by Isabel Wilkerson, who is the award-winning author of The Warmth of Other Suns, and her most recent book is a bestseller, Caste. And she talks about how America is like an old house, my wife and I, we owned an old home prior to moving to Columbus, and it was beautiful, had a lot of charm. It was in a well-established community. We really liked the big sidewalks and the big trees in our front yard. Everything was nice. But when we went to go sell that house, the home inspector came and looked at the house and found everything that was wrong with it. And some of those things, I was like, well, we didn't build the house, Yeah, I don't know. That shouldn't be my problem. That was here when I got here already. And a lot of people look at race and or issues of race and racism that same way. They say, well, look, this is the system that I inherited. I was born into this. I never owned slaves. I didn't have discriminatory practices in my business, or et cetera, et cetera. It shouldn't be on me to fix it. And the same anecdote that Isabel Wilkerson shares is meant to inform us, we all own the house now. It's our house. This is America's house. And the home inspector, society, the media, social media, it's revealed to us. It's held up the mirror to us and shown us now who we are. And now we all have a collective responsibility to help renovate the house. Let's fix the broken window and the leaky pipes. Let's address the foundation that's uneven so that the house doesn't crumble one day. I think when it comes to dealing with systemic racism, many of us feel like, well, why is it our problem? Because, I walked into this system. I haven't benefited from these generations of privilege that you're talking about. But in the truth, we have to realize that the system we have now, just like Mekka was saying, this is a system that we all need to look at together and see what needs to be dismantled, what needs to be reformed, what needs to be built upon, so that we can have a more equitable society moving forward.
Okay. Maybe if you guys could talk about kind of the current kind of divisive political culture and how it fits in. I mean, this conversation brings in, it forces us to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations right now. It's happening in an election year. We've got to talk about, the decades of police policies on escalation of force. We've got to talk about gun control. We've got to talk about housing equity. I mean, these systems, a lot of these things fall along these political fault lines. I mean, how do you see kind of the political culture feeding into people's desire for greater social equity?
If I can, I'll touch a little bit on it. I don't like talking too many politics, but right now politics is like everything in our country. I feel like we're going to discuss a lot of those things, a lot of those institutional things that are affecting our country in this election, like we do every election. And I think what's about this election is that we are dealing with someone who's in office that has the full intent to empower and create more of that fear and that separation and all of the things that we need to be focusing on to improve in this moment. I feel like we have someone in power who is trying to really bring that to the forefront from a negative standpoint, trying to embody that and embrace it and empower himself and others through that lens that has set up this establishment in the first place. And so this is a monumental time for us. And I think this is when action is needed even more, because we've seen generations not get engaged in politics, and those who try to use that against us, knowing that we won't get engaged with politics, and that there are some people who choose not to vote and not to think about local elections, all that type of stuff. They're on full attack, and if we don't become aware of that, like as a culture, as a people, and really fight to get people aware of every law down to the local, like we said, like you need to know what is going on in your own community, and then how that even trickles up to what's happening nationally. But this year's election is probably one of the most important elections of, I know, my lifetime, but of a couple of generations' lifetime.
I think one thing that when you're talking about politics, I think one thing, this period of time has been, the last 4 years, I guess you could say, has been an awakening for people, and even in all kinds of people, young people and old people alike, in terms of why voting is really important, right? Because we're dealing with now, because a lot of times it's just like kind of, in regular times, you don't really know what's going on day to day with your politicians and what exactly they're doing. And they're not a ton of big issues that are happening. They kind of run on a platform and then they just coast. But now you're actually seeing, okay, well, we have COVID and we have, unrest, and we have, many different issues. So you're actually getting to see, not even just from the presidential level, but even locally, how are people dealing with these issues? How are they leading us through these issues, which is essentially what we elect them to do. Not just what are they actually doing, which is obviously probably the most important thing, but what are they saying? How are they making us feel, right? And I think that is what's made this election different, because when you're talking about Trump, for example, he has drawn a line in the sand, unlike any other politician probably has ever done in this country, which is that this is who I am, this is how I feel, it's us versus them, and them are citizens of this country, right? So that's what makes it unique, and you rarely even see that, even from other Republicans. This isn't a Republican thing, it's not a conservative thing, it's actually a Trump thing, which is different. And so now he's put it out there on the table, right? We know where he stands. He's shown us where he stands. And so now it's really us versus them. That's what he's done. He's drawn that line in the sand. People have to decide, where do they stand? Where are they going to stand in this moment of history, within the most important election coming up, like Yogi said? And you have the ability to vote. You have the ability to not just vote, but activate other people to vote, encourage people to vote, educate people on issues, let people know what else is going on. Supreme Court justices can potentially be, appointed right now, are being appointed, potentially going to be appointed, a new one after the passing of RBG. And that could influence what this country, the laws of this country for decades. So people are starting to see the impact of what this really, really means. And so I think it's, again, incumbent on us to make sure, for people who don't understand that it's not just about, okay, Republicans versus Democrats. It's really about, what do you want this country to be, look like, and feel like for the next 100 years?
Earlier I mentioned about Tamir Rice, and what comes to mind often when I talk to people about the importance of being involved civically, here at Nationwide Children's and other pediatric practices around the country, we have this idea, this hashtag, vote kids, this idea that we want people to think about how the policies that are promoted by the candidates for office affect children and affect families. That is a primary objective of mine. And, I think about the impact of how laws are differentially enforced on different groups of children. as something that is beyond politics. For me, the concept of Black Lives Matter is not political, because my life is not political. It's moral. And it's a statement of morality when I make that statement. The way that we enforce laws around the use and abuse of firearms in our country. You don't have to go very far from Columbus, Ohio, to get to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and see how different individuals are treated, including a child who brandished an actual firearm, unlike the young man, the boy, Tamir Rice, who was shot and killed in Cleveland. This young man brandished an actual firearm and killed people. And the way he was treated by law enforcement was radically different from the way that Tamir Rice was treated. How laws are differentially enforced has an impact on our communities, and it has an impact on our community's health. And I think, just like my brother Mekka has said, it's important for us, if we want our society to look and function equitably and not be, and where laws are not differentially enforced, but that there really is liberty and justice for all in our country, then we really have to pick leaders who embrace that concept. And it's incumbent upon all of us, again, regardless of party label, to evaluate candidates for office who we believe are going to do just that.
Okay, great. So we'll switch things up here a little bit and kind of bring it back to Parsons Avenue. We've seen kind of the economic bottom thanks to COVID here, and it seems like things are kind of continuing. So maybe I'll ask each one of you guys a question kind of specifically. So maybe Mekka, tell me about, should someone start a business right now? Any thoughts on the current climate?
Well, I think it's interesting because, I do a lot of consulting for a lot of businesses right now, and some businesses are struggling, and there's some businesses that are actually thriving through this pandemic. So I think that, you don't want to be too, I guess, capitalistic, right, during this period of time. But at the same time, you do recognize that during times of catastrophe that there's actually tremendous amounts of opportunity. And I've seen a number of new young businesses start, whether it's consulting or, fitting some type of need that's associated with the pandemic and people being at home or people not being able to move. So there's definitely tremendous amounts of opportunity. I don't think people should shy away from it, but I do think people need to evaluate this differently than they would have evaluated it maybe at this time last year, right? How is this business going to potentially help people kind of either get through this pandemic, or as the world changes and looks different in the next few years at least, what's the value proposition that I'm kind of bringing to the table with this business?
Okay, and then Yogi, maybe one for you here. There's a lot of people that were really kind of confident about Parsons Avenue and kind of that it was hitting the tipping point here before all this. What would you say to people maybe now who are apprehensive about investing, in the neighborhood?
Well, there's a lot of benefit to investing into the neighborhood right now. There's a couple ways to look at it. If you're a small entrepreneur, there's like Mekka said, there's opportunity that comes out of, challenges and situations and times like these. And so if you're a small business owner, if there's a need that's particularly in that community, or if there's a value for putting your business in that community, now is the right time for that. There's a lot of funding, there's a lot of support, there's a lot of grants, there's a lot of things that can help businesses help people in a time of need. CARES Act dollars are specifically going towards businesses that are helping, communities in need. So there's a lot of things that are happening right now to help benefit the small business and entrepreneurs if you're moving in that direction. COVID really, you had the COVID relief, which is more about, how can we help you in this moment? Because a lot of people lost jobs, lost a lot of income, lost connection, family. But now we're starting to look at stabilization and how do we help, community stabilize. And so there's a lot of funds that are being put into that. So from a small business perspective, and then also from a further development perspective, workforce development, creating jobs in communities. Some of these companies that are thriving in a COVID time, these are the perfect communities to build your business in, because not only are you helping a community through workforce development, you're offering, but you're also helping build communities that have potential. And the Parsons Avenue has a lot of potential. You're seeing cool projects go up there, the space over there where Commune is at and the brewery is at. You've seen cool spots like $2 Radio and things pop up in the neighborhood. And most culturally cool, connected communities, start in communities that are, a little bit on the edge, a little bit that have a little bit of grit to them, that have a mix of innovation and also diverse points of view. That's how you really build a cultural community. So I encourage people to build communities, build in communities that are primed for like the right type of development, not corporate development where you're bringing in and displacing people, but small shops, small business owners led by them. Parsons Avenue is a perfect opportunity for that. And that's something that benefits everybody. Small business is definitely the driver in communities like that.
Okay. Great, guys. Well, I think in the interest of keeping this to 30 minutes, we can wrap up now. So I'll toss it back to Brian.
I want to take a minute. Thank you, Tristan, for volunteering to moderate. And you know what? Honestly, we could have this discussion go on for an hour. All three of you were fantastic. Really appreciate you joining us today, engaging in this discussion. I want to encourage everybody to remember to get out there and vote on November 3rd. Vote like your life depends on it, because it may. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good one.
Good stuff. I appreciate you all.
All right, no problem. You guys take care. Have a good weekend. Be safe.
Yeah, you too.
Every year, we like to highlight a key partner and present them with our Partner of the Year award. This year, we are honoring Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing. Ohio Capital has been a supporter of ours since we formed PARC 6 years ago and has been gracious enough to lend us the expertise of one of their staff members, Millie Hurt, to our board. So I'd like to take a moment and introduce Peg Mortal, President and CEO of Ohio Capital, and she also was one of last year's keynote speakers. Peg?
Hi, Brian, thanks so much. I'm so glad to join you today. I wish we were with you in person. Thank you so much for this award. We really appreciate it. But we are really just so happy to be your partners in the work on PARC, and to continue the work that we've been doing in the South Side of Columbus. It's so important, and it's so good to see that you're making such good progress. I know you have a big year ahead and a lot of important plans, and you've just recently secured the Kogo bike rack at the library, which may seem like a small thing, but it says a lot to the people in the neighborhood, and we're so glad to be a part of it. I'd also like to recognize Millie Hurt from our staff. She brings a lot of passion to the work that we're doing with you in the South Side, and to the work of the PARC board. So congratulations again on another successful year. We look forward to being your partner going forward. And Brian, take good care.
Thank you, Peg. We appreciate your leadership and the work that Ohio Capital does, not only on the South Side, but all over the state of Ohio. Thank you again.
This concludes PARC's 2020 annual event. Thank you for joining me. If you would like to keep up on our activities throughout the year, please visit our website, Twitter, or Facebook pages, which you can find on the screen right now. I hope that next year we can gather in person, but until then, should you need us, we're only a Zoom away. Good night.